fountain in Pioneer Square had been rigged with special lighting. Elena noticed this detail first. Not the crowd gathering in a suspiciously perfect semicircle. Not the string quartet that had seemingly materialized from nowhere. Not even David dropping to one knee with a ring box that caught the autumn sunlight at precisely the right angle. She noticed the lights because she was an architect. Details were her profession. And someone had gone to considerable trouble to ensure this moment would photograph beautifully. "Elena," David said, his voice projecting in a way that seemed rehearsed. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were the one person who could make my life complete." There was a videographer. Elena registered this fact with the same distant clarity she had noted the lighting. A professional with a stabilizer rig, circling to capture multiple angles. Behind him, she could see at least 3 people holding up phones, recording. "Will you marry me?" 300 strangers waited for her answer. That was not an exaggeration. She could see them arranged in neat rows, their faces expectant. Some were already smiling, anticipating the happy ending they had come to witness. "Yes," Elena heard herself say. "Yes, of course." The crowd erupted in applause. David slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, which meant he had somehow obtained her ring size without her knowledge, and pulled her into a kiss that lasted exactly long enough for good photographs, but not so long as to seem inappropriate. The string quartet began playing something triumphant. Strangers rushed forward to congratulate them. And Elena stood in the center of it all, feeling like she was watching herself from very far away. Her name was Elena Vasquez, though no one in the crowd knew that. She was 29 years old, a junior architect at Morrison Design Group, and she had just gotten engaged to a man who had turned what should have been an intimate moment into a public spectacle, without asking if that was what she wanted. Wasn't that incredible? A woman with tears in her eyes grabbed Elena's hand. "I was just walking through the square, and I got to witness true love." "Thank you," Elena managed. The ring felt heavy on her finger. David was accepting congratulations from a group of men who appeared to know him, which was strange because Elena did not recognize any of them. His arm was around her waist, proprietary and tight. "We should celebrate," he announced to the crowd, as if they were all invited. "There's a reception at the hotel across the street. Everyone's welcome." A reception. He had planned a reception for a proposal without knowing if she would say yes. No, Elena corrected herself. He had known she would say yes. Because what else could she do with 300 people watching, with cameras recording, with the moment already unfolding according to his careful design? The hotel ballroom had been decorated. Champagne was already being poured. There was even a small cake with "She said yes" written in elaborate frosting script. "How did you plan all this?" Elena asked quietly, still wearing the smile that felt painted on her face. "I wanted it to be perfect," David said, kissing her temple. "You deserve perfect." But perfect for whom? The question formed in her mind and stayed there, unwelcome and insistent. Kara found her an hour later, having seen the proposal on social media, because of course it was already online, multiple videos from multiple angles, strangers' accounts of the romantic public proposal they had witnessed. "Elena?" Kara pulled her aside, her expression carefully neutral. "That was quite a production. It was romantic," Elena said automatically, then meeting her best friend's eyes. "Wasn't it?" Kara studied her face for a long moment. "Was it what you wanted?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Elena opened her mouth to say yes, of course. Who wouldn't want a romantic public proposal? But what came out was, I don't know. They were standing in the bathroom, away from the ongoing celebration that showed no signs of ending. Elena looked at herself in the mirror. Makeup perfect, hair perfectly styled as if she had known to prepare for photographs. Had David told her to dress up today? She couldn't remember. "He planned all of this without telling you," Kara said carefully. "The crowd, the videographer, this party. He knew you would say yes." "How could I say no?" Elena's voice cracked slightly. There were hundreds of people watching. Exactly. That single word hung between them, heavy with implications Elena was not ready to examine. She had met David 18 months ago at a networking event for young professionals. He worked in commercial real estate development, dealt with investors and contractors and city planning boards. He was confident, successful, the kind of man who commanded attention when he entered a room. Their first date had been at a restaurant with a wait list months long. David knew the owner. He knew everyone. He had spent the evening telling her about his vision for transforming Portland's East Side, about the projects he was developing, the future he was building. And you, he had said, taking her hand across the table. You could be part of that future. An architect and a developer, we could create something incredible together. It had felt flattering at the time. Now, replaying the memory, Elena heard different undertones. Not, we could create a life together, but you could be part of my vision. The relationship had moved quickly. Within 3 months, David had a key to her apartment. Within 6, he was suggesting she move into his condo downtown. More space, better location, closer to both their offices. She had agreed because it made practical sense, even though her apartment had been her first place after graduate school, the first space that was entirely hers. David's condo was beautiful, expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city that never failed to impress visitors. It did not feel like home, but Elena told herself she would adjust. She would make it home. Instead, she had found herself spending less time there, working late at the office, accepting evening project deadlines, finding excuses to stay away. She had not examined why until now, standing in a hotel bathroom, wearing an engagement ring she had not chosen, bound to a man who had orchestrated her proposal like a theatrical production. I need to get back, Elena said finally. People will wonder where I am. Elena. I'm fine, Kara, really. It's just overwhelming. That's normal, right? Everyone says engagements are overwhelming. Kara's expression suggested she wanted to say more, but she only nodded. Call me tomorrow. We should talk. The party continued until nearly midnight. David was in his element, working the room, introducing Elena to colleagues and business associates she had never met. Every introduction followed the same pattern. This is my fiancée, Elena. She's an architect, brilliant, beautiful, everything I could want. The words should have made her feel valued. Instead, they felt like inventory, items on a checklist of what made a suitable partner. When they finally returned to the condo, Elena was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. That went perfectly, David said, loosening his tie. Did you see how many people were there? The video already has over 50,000 views. You posted it? Elena asked. Of course, why wouldn't I? It's incredible content. He pulled out his phone, showing her the numbers. Views, likes, shares, comments from strangers congratulating them, calling it the most romantic proposal they had ever seen. Content. He had called their engagement content. You must be exhausted, David said, apparently mistaking her silence for fatigue. Go to bed. I'll be up in a bit. I want to respond to some of these messages. Elena went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the dress she had somehow known to wear for an event she hadn't known was happening. She looked at the ring on her finger. Platinum, large diamond, expensive and tasteful, and exactly what would photograph well. How had David gotten her ring size? She tried to remember ever having that conversation, and couldn't. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Sophie. OMG, I just saw the video. Why didn't you tell me David was going to propose? Call me tomorrow. I want to hear everything. Why hadn't she told Sophie? Because she hadn't known. Because David had planned an elaborate public proposal without ever discussing with her what she might want. Because he had known, had absolutely known that she would say yes when 300 strangers were watching, when cameras were recording, when saying no would have required a strength she didn't have in that moment. Elena pulled off the ring and held it in her palm, studying it in the dim light. It was beautiful. It was expensive. It was wrong in a way she couldn't quite articulate yet. She put it back on her finger, because taking it off felt like admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. Through the closed bedroom door, she could hear David on the phone, his voice animated as he recounted the proposal to someone. "You should have seen her face," he was saying, completely surprised. It was perfect. Surprised. That was one word for it. Elena lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in her chest, a small voice was asking a question she didn't want to answer. If she had been alone with David, if it had been just the two of them, if there had been no cameras and no crowd and no performance, would she have said yes then? She fell asleep without knowing the answer, or perhaps not wanting to know. The morning after the proposal, Elena woke to find David already gone. A note on the kitchen counter read, "Meeting with investors. Dinner tonight at Marco's, 7 p.m. Wear something nice. Love you." Not, "Would you like to have dinner?" Or "Are you free tonight?" Just an instruction, wear something nice. Elena made coffee and opened her laptop, intending to review the drawings for the Morrison project that were due next week. Instead, she found herself typing David into the search bar, looking at the proposal video that had now accumulated over 200,000 views. She watched herself say yes, watched the way David's smile seemed calculated for the camera, watched the crowd's reaction, and noticed for the first time that several people in the front row had been holding professional cameras, not just phones. She clicked through to the comments. Thousands of them, strangers weighing in on her life. "This is what every woman dreams of. He put so much effort into this. She's so lucky. I hope my boyfriend sees this and takes notes." But scattered among the praise were other voices. Did anyone else notice she looked uncomfortable? This feels performative. Where's the intimacy? Public proposals are emotional manipulation. She couldn't say no with everyone watching. Elena closed the laptop. Her phone rang. Her mother calling from Sacramento. "Elena, I can't believe I had to find out about your engagement from the internet. Your father and I are so hurt you didn't tell us David was planning this." "I didn't know, Mom. He surprised me." "Well, it was certainly a surprise to us too. We're your parents. Don't you think we should have been there?" The conversation continued for 20 minutes, her mother cycling through hurt feelings, excitement about wedding planning, and questions about dates and venues that Elena had no answers for. When she finally hung up, Elena felt more exhausted than before. She arrived at the Morrison Design Group offices at 9, hoping to lose herself in work. Instead, she walked into an ambush of congratulations. Someone had decorated her desk with balloons. The office manager had brought cupcakes. "Let's see the ring," her colleague Amanda demanded, and Elena found herself displaying her hand while a group gathered around to admire the diamond. Michael, the senior architect who had been her mentor since she joined the firm, hung back from the crowd. When the others finally dispersed, he approached her desk. "Congratulations," he said quietly. "Though I have to say, I'm surprised. You never mentioned David was planning to propose." "I didn't know." Something shifted in Michael's expression. "He didn't discuss it with you first?" He wanted it to be a surprise. Michael was silent for a moment, studying her face with the same careful attention he applied to reviewing drawings. "Elena, may I speak frankly?" She nodded. "In the 15 months you've worked here, I've watched you grow into an exceptional architect. You have instincts most people take years to develop. But in that same time, I've also watched you become less certain of yourself. You second-guess decisions you would have made confidently a year ago. You apologize for taking up space in meetings. You've stopped volunteering ideas unless specifically asked." Elena felt her face flush. "I'm just trying to be more professional." "Professional or compliant?" Michael asked gently. They're not the same thing. Before Elena could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from David. Confirmed dinner reservation. Invited Peter and his wife to join us. Good networking opportunity. Be there by 6:45. Her dinner plans had just become a business meeting she hadn't agreed to attend. Michael noticed her expression. Everything all right? Fine, Elena said automatically. Just wedding planning stuff. It's exciting. The lie tasted bitter. She spent the day trying to focus on the Morrison project, a mixed-use development that needed her drawings finalized by Friday. But her concentration kept fracturing. She would find herself staring at her ring, feeling the weight of it, wondering why something that should make her happy felt like a shackle. At lunch, Kara showed up at her office with sandwiches. You haven't responded to any of my texts, Kara said, closing the office door behind her. I'm worried about you. I'm fine, just busy. Elena. Kara sat down across from her. I've known you since college. I know what fine looks like. And this isn't it. Elena set down her pencil and met her friend's eyes. Kara, did you know David was going to propose? No. Why would I? I just keep thinking. If I had known, if he had told me his plans, would I have been excited? Or would I have felt exactly how I feel now? Which is? Elena searched for the right words. Trapped. I feel trapped. Saying it aloud made it real in a way that terrified her. Kara reached across the desk and took her hand. Then don't go through with it. How can I not? It's all over the internet. Everyone knows. My family is already talking about venues and dates. David has probably told his entire business network. None of that matters if you don't want to marry him. But I do want to, Elena insisted. David is successful, ambitious. He's building an incredible career. We make sense together. Making sense and being happy are two different things. Elena pulled her hand back. You never liked him. That's not true. I didn't know him well enough to like or dislike him. But I've watched you change since you started dating him, and I haven't liked that. People change in relationships. That's normal. Shrinking isn't growth, Elena. The words hit harder than Kara probably intended. Elena turned back to her drawings, blinking against sudden tears. I have to finish these, she said. And I have a dinner tonight. David's meeting with his business partner. On the night after your engagement, you should be celebrating together, not networking. We're doing both. Elena kept her eyes on the page. I should get back to work. Kara left, but her words stayed. Shrinking isn't growth. Elena worked until 6, then packed up her things and headed to her car. David had texted 3 more times with instructions about dinner. What to wear, what topics to avoid, which projects of his to mention if conversation lagged. She was applying lipstick in the rearview mirror when her phone rang. An unknown number. Is this Elena? Yes. Who's calling? My name is Nina. I'm David's sister. Elena's hand froze mid-motion. Oh. Hi. I don't think we've met. No, we haven't. David and I aren't close, haven't been for years, but I saw the proposal video, and I needed to call you. Something in Nina's tone made Elena's stomach tighten. Why? Because I've watched my brother do this before. The grand gesture, the public spectacle, the fairy tale romance that's really about him controlling the narrative. Nina took a breath. How much has he told you about his previous relationships? Not much. He said he dated someone seriously a few years ago, but it didn't work out. Her name was Jessica. David proposed to her at a charity gala in front of 500 people. She said yes, because what else could she do? 3 months later, she called off the wedding. Do you know why? Elena's mouth had gone dry. Why? Because she found emails proving David had been systematically lying to her about his finances, his business dealings, his relationships with other women. He had built an entire false narrative about who he was, and the public proposal was his way of locking her in before she could discover the truth. That's not... David wouldn't... Elena, I'm not trying to ruin your happiness, but I needed you to know that my brother views relationships as performances. Everything is about how it looks to other people. And if you're having any doubts at all, you need to investigate them now, before you're legally bound to him. Why are you telling me this? Because Jessica tried to warn the next woman, and no one believed her. David had already spread stories about her being unstable, vindictive. I watched him destroy her reputation to protect his own. I won't watch him do that again without at least trying to warn you. Elena sat in her car, the engine running, her carefully applied makeup beginning to smear as tears started. Thank you for calling, she managed. I have to go. I'm late for dinner. Elena, Nina said urgently. One more thing. David keeps detailed records of everything. Emails, texts, financial documents. If you need proof of who he really is, it's somewhere in his files. Be careful and be smart. The call ended. Elena looked at herself in the mirror, engagement ring glinting, makeup streaked, hands shaking. She could go to dinner. She could smile and network and play the role of the perfect fiancé. She could ignore Nina's warning and convince herself that David was different with her, that what he had with Jessica was irrelevant to their relationship. Or she could start looking for proof. Elena put the car in gear and drove, not toward the restaurant, but back toward David's condo. Their condo, she corrected herself, though it had never felt like hers. She had 90 minutes before David would expect her at dinner. 90 minutes to either confirm her fears or put them to rest. The condo was silent when she entered. David's home office was normally off-limits. He said he needed a space that was just his, where he could focus on work without distraction. Elena had respected that boundary for 18 months. She stopped respecting it now. The office was meticulously organized, file cabinets labeled by year and category, a desk with 3 monitors, a locked drawer that took Elena only 2 tries to open with a letter opener. Inside were files, not business files, personal ones. The first folder was labeled J, presumably Jessica. It contained printouts of text messages, social media posts, even what appeared to be therapy notes. David had documented everything about his previous relationship, creating a dossier that painted Jessica as emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, a woman who had manipulated him and then destroyed his reputation when he tried to end things. But underneath those documents were others. Emails David had sent to business associates, warning them about Jessica, spreading stories about her behavior. Screenshots of conversations where he had deliberately provoked her, then saved her emotional responses as evidence of instability. He had systematically built a false narrative about her, then used it to destroy her credibility when she left him. Elena pulled out another folder, this one labeled with just the letter E. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. Inside were notes, detailed observations about her routines, her relationships, her insecurities. David had been documenting her from the beginning, noting which approaches worked to make her more compliant, which friends to separate her from, which tactics effectively isolated her. There was a timeline marking key relationship milestones, but next to each one were notes about strategy. Proposal, public setting essential, must make private refusal impossible. He had planned it, not just the proposal itself, but the manipulation that would make her unable to refuse. Elena's phone buzzed. David. Where are you? Peter is already here. She photographed every page in the folder with her phone. Then she photographed the folder labeled J, and several others she didn't have time to examine closely. She returned everything to the drawer exactly as she had found it. Then she left the condo and drove to the restaurant, her mind working through implications she wasn't ready to fully process. David was waiting in the lobby, his expression irritated. "You're late. I told you 6:45. "Traffic," Elena said. "I'm sorry." The apology came automatically, and she hated herself for it. Peter and his wife turned out to be pleasant enough, but Elena barely processed the conversation. She smiled, nodded, asked appropriate questions at appropriate times. She was performing, just as David had trained her to do, but underneath the performance, she was planning. Nina had been right about one thing. David kept detailed records, which meant Elena now had detailed records of his manipulation. The question was what to do with them. She could leave. Pack her things, move back into her old apartment if it was still available, end the relationship before it went any further. But David wouldn't let her leave quietly. She had seen what he did to Jessica, the systematic destruction of her reputation, the narrative that painted him as the victim. If Elena left now, she would become the next unstable ex-girlfriend, and David would be the sympathetic man who had tried to help her. No. If she was going to leave, she needed to do it in a way that protected herself. That meant gathering more evidence, understanding the full scope of his manipulation, and finding allies who could corroborate the truth. It meant being strategic in exactly the way David had been strategic with her. "Elena," Peter's wife was saying, "David tells us you're an architect. That must be so creative." "It is," Elena said, and felt herself smile. "I'm working on a really exciting project right now, actually. Mixed-use development downtown. We're trying to balance commercial viability with community needs. It's a challenge. But I love solving those kinds of puzzles." She saw David's expression shift slightly. He didn't like when she talked about her work at length, preferred when she deferred to his stories about development deals and investor meetings. Too bad. "The key is thinking three-dimensionally," Elena continued, warming to her topic. "Most people see buildings as static objects, but they're really complex systems: circulation, light, program, structure. Every decision affects everything else." "Fascinating," Peter said. "David, you didn't mention Elena was working on the Morrison project. That's a significant development." David's smile was tight. "She's part of the team, yes. Though I'm sure the senior architects handle most of the actual design work. Actually," Elena said calmly, "I'm the lead designer. Michael oversees, but the core vision is mine." It was the first time she had corrected David publicly, the first time she had claimed her own accomplishments instead of diminishing them. The dinner continued, but Elena noticed David watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Confusion? Concern? Whatever it was, he didn't like this version of her. The one who spoke confidently, who didn't apologize, who took up space. Good. When they returned to the condo that night, David was quiet. Elena prepared for an argument, but instead he pulled her close. "I'm proud of you," he said. "The way you talked about your work tonight." Peter was impressed. "You're going to be an asset at these events. An asset, not a partner, not an equal, an asset." Elena pulled away gently. "I'm tired. I think I'll go to bed." "Already? I thought we might celebrate properly tonight." "Tomorrow," Elena said. "I have an early meeting." She didn't, but she needed space. She needed time to think. In the bedroom, she transferred the photographs from her phone to a cloud storage account David didn't know about. Then she texted Kara. "You were right. I need help. Can we meet tomorrow?" The response came immediately. "Anytime, I'm here." Elena lay in the dark, listening to David moving around in the other room, and began to formulate a plan. She had evidence of manipulation. She had an ally in Nina. She had Kara's support. What she needed now was more information about David's business dealings, his other relationships, his vulnerabilities. She needed to understand her opponent completely before making her move. Because this was no longer about a broken engagement. This was about protecting herself from a man who documented and manipulated and destroyed anyone who threatened his carefully constructed image. And Elena refused to become his next victim. The Morrison project consumed Elena's next 2 weeks, which gave her the perfect excuse to spend long hours at the office and away from David's scrutiny. She worked genuinely on her drawings, but she also worked on something else, building her case. Nina became an unexpected ally. They met for coffee on a Wednesday afternoon, choosing a place across town where David's network was unlikely to see them. "Jessica agreed to talk to you," Nina said, sliding her phone across the table with a contact saved. "She's been waiting years for someone to believe her." Elena saved the number. "What happened to her after she left David?" Nina's expression darkened. "He ruined her. She worked in marketing at a tech company. David spread rumors to her employer about erratic behavior, substance abuse, things that were completely fabricated. She lost her job. Her friends stopped calling because David had gotten to them first with his version of events. She moved to Seattle to start over. And no one questioned his story? Would you? A successful businessman, well-connected, respected in his industry, saying his ex-fiancée had serious problems? People believe the narrative that makes the most sense to them. David is very good at making his lies sound like compassionate concern. Elena thought about the folder in David's drawer, the meticulous documentation designed to support whatever story he chose to tell. "I need to know how he operates, what his patterns are, where he's vulnerable." "His vulnerability is his image," Nina said immediately. "Everything David does is about perception. He can't tolerate being seen as anything less than successful, admirable, in control. That's why he documents everything, so he can shape the story if anyone challenges him. So if I leave, he'll use those documents to destroy me. Unless you document him first. Unless you build a case so solid that his narrative can't compete with the facts." Elena pulled out her phone and showed Nina some of the photographs she had taken from David's files. Nina's face went pale as she scrolled through them. "This is sick," she whispered. "He's been planning your relationship like a business strategy." "That's exactly what he's been doing. The question is, what else is he hiding? If he manipulates his personal relationships this carefully, what's he doing in his business?" Nina looked up sharply. "You think he's involved in something illegal? I think someone who lies this systematically probably doesn't limit those lies to his personal life." "I might know someone who can help," Nina said slowly. "Thomas. He used to work with David's company before they had a falling out. David told everyone Thomas was stealing from clients, forced him out. But Thomas always said David was projecting, that David was the one engaging in financial improprieties. Can you put me in touch with him?" "I'll try. But Elena, you need to be careful. If David suspects you're investigating him, he'll accelerate whatever timeline he's operating on. Men like him don't react well to losing control." Elena knew Nina was right. For the past 2 weeks, she had been playing the role of eager fiancé, discussing wedding venues with David's mother, allowing him to introduce her to business associates, smiling through dinners where he talked about their future in ways that never included her actual dreams or preferences. But she had also been watching, noticing, recording. She noticed that David checked his phone constantly, often stepping away to take calls he never explained. She noticed that certain names made him tense, Thomas being one of them. She noticed that his business partner Peter sometimes looked uncomfortable during David's explanations of upcoming deals. There were cracks in the facade. She just needed to widen them. That Friday, David announced they would be attending a gallery opening, an artist whose work was being promoted by one of his investors. "It's important we're seen there," he said. "Wear the black dress, the one with the high neck, and minimal jewelry. We don't want you looking ostentatious." Elena wore the blue dress instead. The one David had once said was too bold, too attention-seeking. She paired it with the earrings her grandmother had given her. When David saw her, his jaw tightened. "I asked you to wear the black dress." "I know. I preferred this one." "Elena, is there a problem?" She met his eyes steadily. "I thought we were going to an art opening, not a corporate meeting." She watched him recalibrate, saw the moment he decided it wasn't worth the fight. "Fine. But please try to be more considerate of my preferences in the future." "I'll consider it," she said pleasantly. The gallery was crowded with people who seemed to know David. He worked the room expertly, introducing Elena with the same possessive pride he might show for a new car. "My fiancée, Elena. She's an architect, brilliant and beautiful." Always the same phrasing, always reducing her to 2 dimensions. Elena endured it for an hour, then excused herself to look at the artwork. The pieces were interesting. Large, abstract canvases that played with light and shadow. She was studying one particularly striking piece when a man approached. "It's more interesting from here," he said, gesturing to a different angle. She shifted position and saw what he meant. The painting revealed hidden shapes depending on where you stood. "I'm Thomas," the man said. Elena's attention sharpened. "Nina's friend. She said you might be here tonight. I've been hoping for a chance to talk to you without David's surveillance." "He's not surveilling me," Elena said automatically, then stopped. "Is he?" "Not in an obvious way. But he monitors who you talk to, how long conversations last, whether you're paying attention to him or to others. It's subtle, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it." Elena glanced across the room and found David watching her, his expression unreadable. "We should make this look casual," Thomas said. "I'll pretend to explain the artwork. You nod occasionally." "What do you know about David's business?" "I know he presents himself as a legitimate developer, but at least 3 of his projects have involved suspicious financing. Money coming from sources he won't disclose, investors who don't seem to exist, partnerships that dissolve right before any regulatory scrutiny. I tried to report it when I worked with him, and he buried me. Spread rumors, destroyed my professional reputation, made sure I couldn't work in commercial real estate in this city again." "Do you have proof?" "Some. Financial documents from when I still had access to company records, but nothing definitive enough to take to authorities without corroboration." He paused. "Why are you asking? Are you thinking of leaving him?" "I'm thinking of protecting myself." "Good. Because David doesn't let people leave cleanly. He makes examples of them." David was crossing the gallery toward them now, his smile fixed and territorial. "Act like we just met," Thomas said quietly. "And be careful, Elena. Whatever you're planning, he'll be 2 steps ahead unless you're smarter and more ruthless than he expects." "Thomas," David said warmly, reaching them. "I didn't realize you were still in Portland. I thought you had moved on to greener pastures." "Still here. Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you. Elena, we should circulate. There are people I need you to meet." It wasn't a suggestion. Elena excused herself from Thomas and followed David deeper into the gallery, but not before she saw Thomas's slight nod. He would help. She wasn't alone in this. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Elena performed her role adequately, but she could feel David's irritation building. In the car on the way home, it erupted. "What were you discussing with Thomas?" "The artwork. He was explaining the artist's technique. Thomas is not someone you should be talking to. He has issues. I had to let him go because of ethics violations. I don't want him near you." "He seemed perfectly pleasant to me." "Elena." David's voice sharpened. "I know what's best in these situations. Thomas is manipulative. He'll try to turn you against me." "Why would he do that?" "Because he's vindictive. He blames me for his failures instead of taking responsibility for his own behavior. I'm telling you this to protect you." Elena looked at David, at the man who had orchestrated a public proposal to prevent her from refusing, who had documented her vulnerabilities to better manipulate her, who had destroyed his last fiancé's reputation when she tried to leave. "Thank you for the warning," she said evenly. "I'll be careful." David relaxed slightly, satisfied that she had accepted his version of reality. He had no idea she was cataloging every manipulation technique, every gaslighting attempt, every effort to control her perception of other people. When they reached the condo, Elena claimed exhaustion and went straight to bed, but she didn't sleep. Instead, she texted Nina. "Met Thomas, need to coordinate, and I need to talk to Jessica." The response came quickly. "Setting up a call. Sunday afternoon, tell David you have a work thing." Sunday afternoon, Elena sat in her car in a parking garage, phone pressed to her ear, listening to Jessica's story. It was eerily similar to her own. The whirlwind romance, the gradual isolation, the public proposal designed to prevent refusal, the discovery of systematic manipulation. "I tried to warn people," Jessica said, her voice still carrying traces of trauma years later. "But David had already poisoned everyone against me. He told my friends I was unstable. He told my employer I had substance abuse issues. He even contacted my family with concerns about my mental health. By the time I realized what he was doing, I had no credibility left." "How did you finally get away?" "I ran. I called off the wedding via email, blocked him on everything, and left Portland within a week. It felt like cowardice at the time, but it was survival. David doesn't accept rejection. He only accepts winning. The only way to beat him is to refuse to play his game." "I can't just run," Elena said. "My career is here, my family. I won't let him drive me out of my own city." "Then you need to beat him at his own game. Document everything, find allies, expose him before he can expose you. And Elena, you need to be prepared for him to escalate. Men like David view relationships as zero-sum games. If he thinks he's losing control of you, he'll burn everything down rather than let you leave on your own terms." After the call ended, Elena sat in her car for a long time, thinking. She had evidence of David's manipulation. She had allies willing to help. What she needed now was the right moment, the right stage, to reveal who David really was. He had used a public setting to trap her. She would use a public setting to free herself. But the stakes were higher than a simple breakup. If Thomas was right about David's business dealings, if there was actual fraud or financial impropriety, then Elena's escape wasn't just about protecting herself. It was about stopping David from victimizing anyone else. She returned to the condo to find David working in his office. Through the half-open door, she could hear him on the phone. "The investment group is pushing for transparency on the funding sources," he was saying. "We need to move some things around before they start asking detailed questions. Can you have the revised documents ready by Thursday?" Elena stood very still in the hallway, recording on her phone. "I don't care if it's irregular," David continued. "The appearance of legitimacy is what matters. As long as the paperwork looks clean, they'll sign off." More evidence. More proof that David's entire life was a carefully constructed fraud. Elena quietly backed away and went to the bedroom. She uploaded the audio file to her secure cloud storage alongside the photographs of David's files. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kara. "You okay? Haven't heard from you all weekend." Elena replied, "Fine, working on something. We'll explain soon. Can you help me with a project next weekend?" "Always. What do you need?" "I need to organize a party." The party planning gave Elena cover for the next phase of her strategy. She told David she wanted to host an engagement celebration, something more intimate than the public proposal, a chance for their genuine friends and family to celebrate together. "That's a wonderful idea," David said, pleased. "We can use it for networking too. I'll invite Peter and some of my key investors. Actually, Elena said carefully, I was thinking just close friends and family. Something personal. David's expression cooled. Elena, everything we do reflects on both of us. An engagement party is an opportunity to strengthen business relationships. Then you can host a business event separately. This party is for us. It was the firmest she had pushed back in months. David studied her face, clearly trying to determine if this was worth a fight. Fine, he said finally, but I want approval on the guest list. Of course, Elena lied. She coordinated with Kara, who threw herself into the planning with enthusiasm. But they weren't just planning a party. They were planning a revelation. You're absolutely sure about this? Kara asked during one of their planning sessions. Once you do this, there's no going back. There's already no going back, Elena said. The moment I found those files, the moment I talked to Jessica and Nina and Thomas, I crossed a line. Either I move forward, or I spend the rest of my life under David's control. The guest list was carefully curated. Elena's real friends and family. Nina, Thomas, Jessica, who had agreed to fly in from Seattle. And yes, some of David's business associates, specifically the ones Elena suspected might have questions about his operations. The venue was a restaurant with a private event space downtown. Elena booked it for 3 weeks out, the Saturday before David's company was supposed to close on a major development deal. The timing was deliberate. Maximum pressure, maximum exposure. In the meantime, she continued to gather evidence. She copied files from David's computer when he was out. She recorded conversations where he contradicted himself or revealed information he thought was private. She built a timeline of his relationship patterns, his business dealings, his systematic manipulation. And she reached out to Michael, her mentor at the firm. I need to ask you something confidential, she said, closing his office door. Have you ever heard anything questionable about David's business operations? Michael's expression grew cautious. Why do you ask? Because I think he's involved in financial fraud, and I think the Morrison project might be at risk if we're associated with him. Elena, that's a serious accusation. I know, and I have evidence to support it. She showed him selected pieces, the phone recordings, the financial documents Thomas had provided, the pattern of suspicious partnerships and sudden dissolutions. Michael went pale as he reviewed the materials. If this is legitimate, we need to report it to the authorities. Not yet. David has too much practice covering his tracks. I need more concrete proof, and I need to ensure he can't retaliate against me or anyone else he's harmed. But I wanted you to know, in case there are any business connections between his firm and Morrison that need to be evaluated. There are, Michael admitted. Peter has been discussing a potential partnership on the East Side development. If David's operations are compromised, that could put our firm at risk. Then I suggest you delay any agreements until after next Saturday. Michael studied her face. You're planning something. I'm planning to tell the truth, in a setting where David can't control the narrative. The week before the party, David grew increasingly busy with the upcoming deal. He was distracted, stressed, spending long hours at the office and on phone calls with investors. He barely noticed Elena's own preparations. She used the time to finalize details with her allies. Nina would attend the party and be prepared to corroborate Jessica's story. Thomas would bring additional financial documentation. Kara would ensure everything was recorded, video and audio backup in case Elena needed proof of what happened. And Jessica had agreed to attend, though Elena could hear the fear in her voice. I don't know if I can face him, Jessica admitted during their final planning call. You won't have to face him alone. We'll all be there. And this time, you won't be the one who looks unstable. He will. The day of the party arrived. Elena dressed carefully, not in something David had chosen, but in something that made her feel strong. A deep green dress that had been her mother's, altered to fit her. the grandmother's earrings, her own choice of shoes. David, consumed with stress about the development deal, barely looked at her. "I might be late," he said, checking his phone obsessively. "There are still issues with the financing we need to resolve." "Take your time," Elena said. "The party doesn't start until 7. She arrived at the venue at 5 to do final checks. Kara was already there, setting up cameras disguised as decoration. "Are you nervous?" Kara asked. "Terrified," Elena admitted, "but also more certain than I've been about anything in 2 years." Guests began arriving at 7. Elena's mother, Sister Sophie, her father. College friends she hadn't seen since she started dating David. Michael and several colleagues from Morrison. Nina arrived with Thomas. And then, at 7:30, Jessica walked through the door. She looked different than Elena had imagined. Stronger, more composed. Not the destroyed woman David had described, but someone who had survived him and rebuilt herself. "Thank you for coming," Elena said, hugging her. "Thank you for believing me," Jessica replied. "No one has in 3 years." David arrived at 8 Kyaung, bringing Peter and several investors Elena recognized from previous networking events. He was in full performance mode, charming, confident, working the room, until he saw Jessica. The color drained from his face. Elena watched him process the impossibility of her presence. Jessica, the ex-fiancée he had driven out of Portland, standing in the middle of his engagement party. "Elena," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Can I speak with you? Privately?" "Anything you need to say, you can say here," Elena replied pleasantly. "Among friends." "I don't think you understand what you've done." "I understand perfectly. I've invited people who know you, really know you, to help celebrate this engagement. Unless there's some reason that makes you uncomfortable." David's jaw clenched. Around them, conversations had quieted. People were starting to sense the tension. "That woman," David gestured at Jessica, "is not stable. I don't know what she's told you, but she has serious issues. I had to end our relationship because she discovered you were systematically manipulating her," Elena interrupted. "Because she found evidence that you had been planning her entire relationship like a business strategy. Because when she tried to leave, you destroyed her reputation to prevent her from telling anyone the truth." The room had gone completely silent now. "Elena, you're not well," David said, his voice shifting to concern, the same tone he probably used when he called Jessica's employer to express worry about her mental state. "This stress, the engagement, I think it's overwhelming you. We should go home and talk about this privately." "I'm not going anywhere," Elena said. "And I'm not the one who's unwell. You are." She pulled out her phone and connected it to the venue's speaker system. Then she played the audio recordings. David's conversations about falsifying financial documents, his discussions about hiding funding sources, his casual dismissal of regulations and ethics. "That's taken out of context," David said quickly, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Is it?" Thomas stepped forward. "Because I have documentation that supports everything Elena just played. Financial records showing suspicious transfers, partnerships that dissolve right before regulatory review, investors who don't seem to actually exist." "Thomas was fired for theft," David told the room, his voice rising. "He's been trying to sabotage me for years." "I was fired for questioning your practices," Thomas corrected. "And then you systematically destroyed my reputation the same way you destroyed Jessica's. The same way you were planning to destroy Elena's if she tried to leave you." Nina spoke up next. "He did the same thing to our father. Manipulated him, isolated him from family, then blamed everyone else when the relationship failed. This is who my brother is. Someone who views other people as props in his personal narrative." Elena watched David's face cycle through emotions: anger, panic, calculation. He was trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation, how to spin this into something he could manage. "These people are conspiring against me," he said, addressing the investors and Peter. "This is clearly a coordinated attack. Using your own words?" Elena held up her phone. "Your own files? Your own documented manipulation? David, you built this case against yourself. I just revealed it." Peter was looking at David with growing horror. "The financing issues we've been having on the development deal, David, have you been falsifying documents?" "Of course not. These accusations are..." "Because if you have, if any of this is true, you've exposed our entire company to legal liability. You've committed fraud, David, using my company as cover." The investors were backing away, literally and figuratively. One of them was already on his phone, presumably calling an attorney. David turned to Elena, and for the first time since she'd known him, his mask completely dropped. What she saw underneath was not love or even anger, but pure cold fury at losing control. "You've destroyed everything," he said quietly. "My business, my reputation, my future. Over what? Some files, some recordings. You had everything with me: security, status, a future, and you threw it away." "I had a cage," Elena corrected. "Beautifully decorated, carefully maintained, but still a cage. You never saw me as a person, David. I was a role in your performance. And the moment I stopped playing that role, you revealed exactly who you are." "No one will believe you," he said desperately. "I'll show them the evidence I've collected about your instability, your..." "Go ahead," Elena said. "Show them the files where you documented my vulnerabilities so you could better manipulate me. Show them the notes where you planned our relationship like a military campaign. Show everyone how you've systematically manipulated every relationship you've ever had." David looked around the room, at Jessica, who had survived him, at Nina, who had warned Elena, at Thomas, who had tried to expose him years ago, at Peter, who was now realizing he'd been complicit in fraud, at Elena's friends and family, who were watching him with disgust. He had no moves left. The performance was over. "This isn't finished," he said, but his voice had lost all power. "Yes, it is," Elena replied. She pulled the engagement ring off her finger and set it on the nearest table. "We're finished, David. The engagement, the relationship, your control over my life. All of it ends tonight." David stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked out. Several of the investors followed him, no doubt to discuss legal implications and damage control. Peter approached Elena, his expression grave. "I had no idea about any of this. If I had known..." "You couldn't have known," Elena said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "David is extremely good at hiding who he really is. What are you going to do now?" "I'm going to turn all of this evidence over to the appropriate authorities, and then I'm going to move on with my life." After Peter left, Elena found herself surrounded by her real support system: her family, her friends, Jessica and Nina and Thomas, who had all taken risks to help her escape. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," Sophie said, hugging her fiercely. "Or the craziest," Elena admitted. "I'm still shaking." "You were amazing," Jessica said. "You did what I couldn't. You stood up to him publicly and didn't let him control the narrative." Kara had been recording the entire confrontation. "You'll want this," she said, handing Elena a drive with the files. "Documentation of everything that was said tonight, in case he tries to rewrite what happened." Elena took the drive, knowing Kara was right. David would try to spin this, would try to claim he was the victim of a coordinated attack. But this time, he wouldn't succeed. This time, there were too many witnesses, too much evidence, Too much truth. The party continued, though it was no longer an engagement celebration. It became something else entirely. A gathering of survivors and allies. A recognition of escape and recovery. Elena's mother pulled her aside near the end of the evening. "I'm so proud of you, and I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner." "I didn't want you to see it," Elena admitted. "I was embarrassed. I kept thinking I should be able to handle it myself. That admitting I'd made a mistake would mean I was weak. Leaving takes more strength than staying ever did," her mother said. "Remember that." The fallout came swiftly. Within 3 days, David's company was under investigation for financial fraud. The development deal collapsed when investors pulled out. Peter dissolved their partnership and issued a public statement distancing his firm from David's practices. Elena provided all her evidence to both regulatory authorities and to a journalist who had been investigating suspicious development projects in Portland. The resulting article was thorough, detailed, and damning. David tried to fight back initially, posting on social media about being the victim of a vindictive ex-fiancé and disgruntled former employees. But the evidence was overwhelming, and his protestations only made him look more desperate. The same network he had used to destroy Jessica's reputation turned against him when presented with documented proof of his fraud and manipulation. Within 2 months, David had declared bankruptcy and left Portland. Elena heard through Nina that he had moved somewhere back east, trying to rebuild in a place where his reputation hadn't preceded him. "Do you think he'll do it again?" Elena asked Nina over coffee one Saturday morning, 3 months after the party. "Find someone new to manipulate?" "Probably," Nina said sadly. "People like David don't change. They just find new victims. But at least next time, there will be a documented history. Anyone who searches his name will find articles about what he did. That's more warning than Jessica or you had." Elena thought about that often, how she had walked into David's trap with no warning, with nothing but her own instincts telling her something was wrong. How many relationships she had tried to rationalize, how many red flags she had ignored because she wanted to believe in the fairy tale he was selling. The Morrison Project became a focal point for her recovery. Without David's influence, without the constant need to make herself smaller and more acceptable, Elena's design work flourished. Michael gave her increasingly complex responsibilities, and when the mixed-use development finally broke ground, it was with her vision largely intact. "You're different now," Michael observed one afternoon, reviewing her latest drawings. "More confident, more willing to defend your ideas." "I'm just myself," Elena said. "For the first time in 2 years, I'm actually myself." Her relationships rebuilt gradually. Friends she had lost touch with during her relationship with David reached back out. Her family stopped worrying constantly about her well-being. And slowly, carefully, she started to trust her own judgment again. Jessica became an unexpected friend. They met regularly, 2 women who had survived the same predator, helping each other process the trauma while celebrating their freedom. "Do you think you'll date again?" Jessica asked during one of their monthly brunches, 6 months after the party. "Eventually," Elena said, "but differently. I know what manipulation looks like now. I know what real respect feels like versus performed respect. I won't settle for less than genuine partnership." "Neither will I," Jessica agreed. "We're both smarter now. Sadder maybe, but definitely smarter." The engagement ring sat in Elena's jewelry box, unclaimed. David had never asked for it back, probably didn't want the reminder of his failure. Elena thought about selling it, but Kara suggested something better. "Melt it down," she said. "Make it into something new. Something that represents who you are now, not who he tried to make you." Elena liked that idea. She took the ring to a jeweler and had the diamond reset into a pendant she wore on important occasions. Meetings where she presented her designs, celebrations of completed projects, moments when she needed to remember her own strength. 1 year after the party, Elena's firm promoted her to senior architect. The promotion came with her own office and leadership on major projects. She celebrated with her real friends and family, people who had supported her through the worst period of her life. "Speech," someone called out, and Elena found herself standing in front of the group, glass of wine in hand. "A year ago," she said, "I was engaged to someone who saw me as a supporting character in his story. Someone who had planned and manipulated our entire relationship to serve his needs. And I said yes to marrying him, because I had forgotten who I was without him." She paused, looking around at the faces of people who had helped her remember. "What I've learned this year is that real love, whether romantic or friendship or family, doesn't require you to become smaller. It doesn't ask you to apologize for taking up space or having opinions or pursuing your dreams. Real love celebrates who you actually are, not who someone needs you to be." Kara was crying. Sophie was grinning. Elena's mother looked prouder than she had at any childhood achievement. "So thank you," Elena continued, "for standing by me, for believing me, for helping me escape, and for reminding me that I was always worth more than I was settling for." The toast that followed was loud and genuine, and full of love. Later that night, alone in the apartment she had moved into after leaving David's condo, a space that was entirely hers, decorated with her taste, filled with her choices, Elena sat by the window and looked out at the city. Portland looked different now. Not smaller or less sophisticated, but more honest. She had reclaimed it, reclaimed her place in it, reclaimed her right to exist here on her own terms. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. For a moment, her stomach clenched. Was it David? Had he found a way to reach her despite all her precautions? But the message was from someone else entirely. A woman named Olivia, who had read the article about David's fraud and manipulation. "I think I'm dating someone like him," the message read. "He proposed in front of my entire family last week, and I said yes, but I don't think I want to marry him. I don't know what to do. Can you help?" Elena stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "Yes. Let's meet for coffee. And bring any evidence you have. You're not alone in this." She sent her contact information and saved Olivia's number. This was how the cycle broke. Not just by escaping yourself, but by helping others see the trap before it fully closed. Over the next few months, Elena heard from 3 more women who had encountered men using similar manipulation tactics. Some were earlier in their relationships and able to exit before the damage deepened. Others, like Jessica, were still recovering from years of systematic abuse. Elena helped them all. She shared her evidence collection strategies, connected them with attorneys and therapists, and most importantly, believed them when they described behaviors that seemed impossible from the charming men who had swept them off their feet. "You're building a network," Kara observed one evening, "of survivors who help other survivors." "I'm just paying forward what Nina and Jessica did for me," Elena said. "If Nina hadn't called, if Jessica hadn't been willing to share her story, I might still be planning a wedding to someone who documented my vulnerabilities like collecting intelligence." 2 years after the proposal that had trapped her and the party that had freed her, Elena stood in that same Pioneer Square fountain area. The city was hosting an architecture exhibition, and several of her designs were featured, including the Morrison Project, now completed and hosting its first residents. Someone had asked her to speak about the project, about her design philosophy, about what inspired her work. "Architecture is about creating spaces where people can be fully themselves," she told the crowd gathered around her display, "where they have room to grow and change and evolve. The worst spaces are the ones that restrict movement, that force people into predetermined patterns, that prioritize aesthetic perfection over human comfort." She was talking about buildings, but she was also talking about relationships, about life, about the difference between structures that support you and structures that confine you. After the exhibition, she walked through the square where David had orchestrated her proposal. The fountain was just a fountain now. No special lighting, no hired crowd, No cameras recording for content. Just water and stone and people passing through on their way to somewhere else. Elena took a photo and sent it to the group chat she maintained with Jessica, Nina, Kara, and the other women she had helped escape similar situations. 2 years ago today, David proposed here, she wrote. 2 years ago, I said yes because I couldn't figure out how to say no. Today, I walked past this spot and felt nothing but gratitude for the narrow escape. The responses came quickly. Nina, proud of you. Jessica, proud of us all. Kara, dinner tonight to celebrate? Elena agreed to dinner and kept walking, back toward her apartment, toward her life, toward a future that was genuinely hers to design. She had learned that the opposite of control wasn't chaos. It was freedom. The opposite of being managed wasn't being lost. It was being trusted to find your own way. And the opposite of David's carefully constructed fantasy wasn't loneliness. It was authentic connection with people who valued her for exactly who she was. The ring David had given her, now transformed into a pendant she wore around her neck, caught the afternoon light. No longer a symbol of entrapment, but a reminder that even things designed to bind you could be reshaped into something that celebrated your strength. Elena touched the pendant briefly, then let her hand drop. She had escaped. She had survived. She had helped others do the same. And every day she chose herself. Her actual self, not the diminished version someone else needed her to be. That, she had learned, was what freedom really meant.